On these floating leaves, survival begins with extraordinary feat. Each step spreads his weight across vegetation too fragile for most birds. Those elongated toes turn an unstable surface into a network of pathways. And beneath these leaves lies the food that keeps him moving. But finding food demands patience. Not every search brings a reward. A missed strike costs little. He simply searches again. Food is only one reason to defend a place among these leaves. And beneath these leaves lies the food that keeps him moving. And here, much of the work ahead will fall to the smaller male. Soon, these fragile plants must support something far more important, a nest. Before building can begin, the foundation must survive his own weight. The materials are close at hand, stems and leaves gathered from the living wetland. Piece by piece, he carries the wetland itself back to the nest. It is a simple platform, shaped more by persistence than precision. Some pieces resist. He adjusts his grip and tries again. The platform remains fragile, supported by the vegetation beneath it. Again, he tests the structure. Any weakness can still be repaired. Repeated journeys gradually turn a few loose stems into a place for incubation. There is no elaborate architecture here. The nest only needs to hold above the water. For now, the platform is ready. The next stage will place it under a far greater test. The first egg transforms this fragile platform into something worth guarding. Over successive laying intervals, the clutch begins to grow. Each addition increases the value caught and vulnerability prop of the nest. 4 eggs complete the clutch. From here, the male takes on the central task. Incubation is largely his responsibility, demanding long periods of stillness and vigilance. Even during incubation, the eggs must be carefully repositioned. But even a devoted incubator must leave, have briefly eyed, to feed. His feeding trips are short. The exposed clutch cannot remain unattended for long. Minutes later, those remarkable feet carry him back across the floating vegetation. And so the rhythm continues. Parm, feed, return, turn the eggs, and wait. For weeks, his world contracts to this small platform and the 4 eggs beneath him. Even an incubating bird must stretch, feed, and maintain his feathers. Every feeding trip is a balance between his own needs and the unattended clutch. Back at the nest, the routine begins again. Inspect, turn, and cover. Inside the shells, development is nearing its end. Then, after weeks of incubation, the first signs of hatching appear. Hatching is not a single moment. The chick works, rests, then tries again. The first chick emerges wet and unsteady Kenya. but already built for a life on the water. Within hours, the quiet clutch is becoming a brood of mobile young. They are only hours old, yet their extraordinary feet are already ready for the world beyond the nest. Leaving the nest begins with a single, uncertain step.
The chicks can move almost immediately, but coordination must be learned step by step.
For young feet, every unstable leaf is a lesson in balance. They watch, probe, and imitate errand, beginning to discover where food can be found. At first, most attempts find nothing. Occasionally, persistence brings a reward. With every journey, the world beyond the nest becomes a little more familiar. A change in his posture carries a warning. Something has caught his attention. His response is immediate. The young are called back beneath his protection.
In one of the Jacana's most remarkable adaptations, the father can shelter his chicks beneath his wings, even while moving.
When the threat passes, 4 small explorers return to the floating world.
Safety still depends on their father, but feeding is becoming their own responsibility. Experience sharpens their search. A failed attempt is quickly followed by another.
With practice, movements that were once hesitant become precise.
Even here, a misplaced foot can mean getting wet-fenned, but not disaster. Soon, some searches require no example from their father at all.
Growing quickly requires more than feeding. Between journeys, the family rests.
As the young grow, the distance between them begins to widen. Survival now depends increasingly on their own senses. The same floating world that once tested every step has become familiar ground. Their father is still nearby, but the young are beginning to live beyond his protection. The skills once learned beside their father are now becoming habits of their own.
Experience is not the absence of mistakes. It is knowing how to correct them.
The brood that once moved as one is beginning to scatter across the wetland. Now, there may be no parent close enough to give the warning first. The movements are familiar now. Walk, search, strike, and move on. There is no ceremony in independence. One day, the distance simply becomes greater. What began as uncertain steps has become a way of life. On a world that never stops moving beneath its feet, another Jacana has learned to stand on its own.